A couple weeks ago, I made a video ranking all of the theme parks I've ever been to, and at least one guy in particular was really shocked by the fact that I had King's Dominion at the top of my list, over parks like Cedar Point, Kings Island, even Universal. And I want to make this video to talk about why I like King's Dominion so much, and how it ended up becoming my favorite park in America. So for a little context, I've been to King's Dominion 4 times now, starting back in 2024, and then I've come back every year since. Um, so this is not a park that people traditionally consider their favorite park. A lot of the time it gets glossed over for the other Virginia park, Busch Gardens Williamsburg, just because that park has, beautiful scenery and a great ride collection and a lot of nostalgia for locals. And as much as I love Busch Gardens, I actually do like King's Dominion more, for a number of reasons. But one thing that King's Dominion really has in common with Busch Gardens is the fact that it's taking advantage of the natural beauty of Virginia. Now, it's not quite to that level. You're not going to get these crazy hills and rivers and landscaping that comes with the budget of a park that's in that chain. But it's still really nice. It's forested. There's a lot of shade, at least around the edges of the park. The air just feels really good in Virginia compared to some other climates that theme parks are in, particularly Kings Island. I know Cincinnati just the air feels thicker in Cincinnati. I don't know, something to it. But I'm a huge fan of forests and woods, and just getting to walk around a theme park where everything is shaded and there's no huge black top sections or midways that are kind of just soaking up all the sun. So the park can get really hot, and in some places like the line for Rapterra, you can feel it. But for the most part, especially if you're just chilling around the paths, it's a really comfortable park to be in, which is impressive given the climate. And something that it has over Busch Gardens is that, while yes, the lack of hills and rivers and valleys makes it a lot less beautiful in that regard, it actually makes it a lot less of a pain in the ass to walk around. Busch Gardens in particular is a park that I almost always get lost at because of the combination of hills, valleys, forests. Not to dog on Busch Gardens, I love that park too. But at King's Dominion, yeah, some of the pathways are a little bit confusing, and there's a few problems with a layout in that park, but for the most part, I don't find myself getting lost. There's no giant hills to trek throughout your day that make going in loops around the park a bit of a pain, in the same way that like Cedar Point or Busch Gardens might, or Dorney or Hershey, especially the Pennsylvania parks. The thing that I really appreciate about King's Dominion is the operations. So this isn't necessarily uncommon for the Cedar Fair parks. Kings Island, the sister park, is known for its great operations, and I have to agree, Kings Island has great operations. But I don't hear people talking about King's Dominion's operations the same way. Maybe they're not quite as good. Twisted Timbers in particular can be a bit slow moving with the locker system, and sometimes guests get really stupid with the locker systems. The trains don't exactly fly out on Twisted Timbers, but it's really not that bad. It's nowhere near like a legacy Six Flags park in that regard. But everywhere else in the park has fantastic operations. Pantherian chews through trains all day, literally, but it sends trains out like crazy too. Some of the smaller rides don't have the greatest throughput, like Toonbilly, Flight of Fear, Reptilian, and like Dominator, honestly. But yeah, some of the smaller supporting rides can get pretty big lines, but when it comes to the headliners, you're talking your Grizzlies, Pantherian, Twisted Timbers, Rapterra, they're just flying trains out on these things, checking them as fast as they can. And on top of that, the operators themselves are a vibe at King's Dominion. Super friendly all the time. really like they seem like they're genuinely happy to be there, which is not always the case at these parks. They're having fun with each other. They're having fun with the riders. Um, in particular, the racer operators are always a blast. And up the crowd. And something that I love, that I don't know if they always do this, but usually when I'm visiting, they are doing this, is the racer operators talking to the Apple's Apple operators because they're so close to each other that they can hear each other over their own speaker systems. So you get off of Racer, and then they're like, now go check out the best ride in the park, Apple's Apple. And, the Apple's Apple ops will fire back at them. So just a really cute vibe going on with the operators at this park. And a nice result of those good operations, combined with the fact that this park tends to attract more of a local family audience, and people are afraid of some of the bigger headliners, is that said headliners tend to never have a line at this park, particularly the top three. Pantherian, Twisted Timbers, and Grizzly very rarely have a line. Timbers sometimes, it's pretty popular with the general audiences. But yeah, at worst, Twisted Timbers is getting up to a 40-minute line. It's no Steel Vengeance hitting 3 hours during peak season or anything like that. And if you time it right, like you go to Twisted Timbers at the start of the day or towards the end, really even sometimes in the middle of the day, if the park isn't particularly busy, you could get close to a walk-on, if not a walk-on. I'm typically able to marathon this ride, especially just like get there at the start of the day, get like 5 rides in before anyone else makes it to that part of the park. And that's true for a lot of parks, but the unique thing is that the best coaster in this park, Pantherian, is too much for most people. So Pantherian just never has a line. I've never seen it with more than like a 15-minute line, even on super busy like Hollow Weekends days. So, if you don't want to wait 40 minutes for Rapterra or 40 minutes for Twisted Timbers, just hit up Pantherian and you'll have a 15-minute wait guaranteed. Then Grizzly is also always a walk-on. Not necessarily because of the intensity, but with this ride, it's just that people aren't really able to find it. So you can pull up to Grizzly, sit wherever you want. The train might be half empty because no one else knows the ride exists. But there you go. And there's not a lot of parks where the 3 best coasters in the park have the shortest lines. Like, that's so uncommon. The longest lines you're going to find in this park are like Toonbeely, Flight of Fear, Apple's Apple, and those rides tend to be one and dones. I'll do them like once per visit, maybe twice. But for the rides that I really want to get my re-rides on, it's super easy to, because everyone else is stuck in line for Toonbeely, Flight of Fear, Apple's Apple, and even Reptilian sometimes. But in terms of those lines, yeah, you're gonna have to wait for them if you're like credit hunting or you're doing the park in the wrong order. But with those, I'll ride them if I see that they have a short line, but like, I'm gonna prioritize the elite headliners anyways. So yeah, Dominator also tends to have a pretty short line unless you hit it when all of the GP have decided it's time to descend upon Dominator. But speaking of the coaster lineup, this is also one of King's strengths. Now, King's Dominion has removed a lot of its best rides over the years. Unfortunately, it was no longer with us, Hypersonic XLC. But the collection they have today is still one of the best collections in the country. So starting with Pantherian, my number 1 at the park, and in my top 5 overall, people talk about how intense this ride is, and the sense of speed you get on it, and how insane the snappiness is in the second half, and that drawn-out first turnaround and everything. And yeah, I would say those are the most memorable parts of the ride, especially if you haven't gotten a lot of rides on it. But something that I've noticed on subsequent rides on Pantherian is that this ride is an ejector airtime, like a sustained ejector airtime machine. I think people tend to glaze over this, and I think the reasoning is because the first turn literally makes people pass out. but that first sustained ejector airtime hill after that turn, like super giant, it's like almost a really big speed hill, or I guess a very short camelback. Um, that thing gives insane sustained ejector, more ejector than any individual moment on like Twisted Timbers or um, most coasters. I would put it up there with like the 5 second floater hill on Mako, uh, some of the bigger hills on Fury, maybe like the Outer Bank on Steve in terms of the amount of sustained ejector you get on that hill. Um, and then, the whip is pretty good throughout the rest of the layout. There's that trimmed speed hill that would give ejector but gives floater instead, and I kind of like variety. And floater is kind of the one thing that the park is missing, so like I'm not really gonna complain. And then that like wave turn thing into the brake run is just insane. Uh, Pantherian is an absolutely elite ride. It's not just an intensity machine, it's also one of the whippiest, most sustained, drawn out Giga Coaster layouts. It is the best Giga. No arguing about that from me. Twisted Timbers is a ride that tends to get its flowers, unlike Pantherian. The GP love it, enthusiasts love it, I love it. You've really heard everything there is to say about this ride. The double camelbacks, that weird little outer bank, the amount of airtime pops it has, the variety of elements in the layout. Yeah, the barrel roll drop is a little bit unimpressive compared to some of RMC's other drops, but I like that it does give a little bit of hang time or a little bit of whip if you're in the back. And then everything else about the layout is just airtime hill after airtime hill, kind of like a mini Steel Vengeance. But honestly, I do find the layout a little bit more memorable than Steel Vengeance. But I do like Steve more. Steve definitely has the more impressive forces. But yeah, nobody is sleeping on Twisted Timbers. Everyone knows how good that ride is. Then my number 3 in the park, or my number 2, depending on the day, is Grizzly. So I'm a huge Gravity Group glazer. They're definitely my favorite wooden coaster manufacturer, and they're up there among my favorite manufacturers overall. But yeah, Grizzly apparently used to be terrible. I only experienced it post retrack. But what they did with that layout, with Gravity Group's pre-cut track, just unbelievable. And I don't really know if this was always there in the layout, because like I'm never able to process what's happening on Wild Beast at Canada's Wonderland, which is the same layout. Um, Whatever they did with the reprofiling on Grizzly is just insane, and it has those ratcheting PTC lap bars, which are, if you get them in the right conditions, and they often are in the right conditions, you're gonna get some crazy fucking standing airtime. It's not quite Phoenix because, there's no buzz bars, but I think this is the closest you can get to Phoenix without having buzz bars. And honestly, the layout is maybe even a little bit better than Phoenix's. The airtime hills are so sharp now. Um, the turnarounds are really funny. They're not necessarily good turnarounds. They're comedic and they're fun. I enjoy them. Their imperfections kind of draw out their funniness. But then every airtime hill just hits. There's a lot of variety for a Woody. And the best moment on this ride is by far that drop into the tunnel, or like a double up kind of thing in the tunnel. Just giving the craziest standing ejector. So Grizzly is not to be slept on, especially if you haven't ridden it since the retrack. Then we have the next best coaster in the park, which in my opinion is Rapterra. And admittedly, there is a bit of a drop in quality between the top 3 and this one, but I will always have a soft spot for a wing coaster. And while Rapterra does kind of have a bouncy launch and maybe a little bit of a rattle throughout the layout, it's not that bad, if I'm being honest. Yeah, it's rougher than it should be for a brand new coaster, and Dominator still ends up smoother. But putting that aside, I think it's a very fun, floaty layout. which complements the brutality of the top three really well. Kind of gives you a break from getting the shit beaten out of you on the other elite rides at this park. The inversions are super graceful, floaty, fun. Um, the path interactions are awesome, and I'll get more into that in the Jungle X section of this video later on. And the Raptor roll at the end gives really good hang time. Not quite as good as Thunderbird's finale, but other than that, definitely my favorite wing coaster finale that I've done. I just love a slow, hang time filled inversion on these wing coasters. Really good at delivering low hang time. A little bit of intensity too. Then naturally the fifth best coaster at this park for me is going to be Dominator. And some people might put Dominator ahead of maybe Grizzly or Rapterra, but for me, it's one of the middle of the pack floorless coasters. The loop is absolutely insane. Like, insane positives at the bottom, crazy hang time at the top. I don't really remember most of the layout on this ride, but I do remember it having a really good 0G roll. And the corkscrews are pretty fun. Probably some of my favorite corkscrews out there. Not that that's saying. But yeah, this ride is good to get your dose of inversions, especially before the park had Rapterra. And it really just has that classic 90s B&M intensity and just a little bit of whip. I do wish it was whippier, but like, hey, you got Alpengeist at Busch Gardens if you need more of that 90s B&M whip, so there you go. Then the rest of the supporting coasters are all pretty good. I like Tumbili, Backlot, Flight of Fear, Reptilian, Racer. With particular note to Tumbili, I know the SNS Free Spin is a controversial coaster model, and Tumbili might be considered the worst amongst them for its shortness. I don't know, I like Tumbili. I've gotten some pretty good rides on the thing. It's definitely not worth a 40-minute wait if you see it getting up to that point, which it can because the capacity is pretty bad. But I don't know, just the feeling of the flips on these things. I've always compared it to getting pushed by the Hulk on a swing set, because you can just get some crazy force depending on the weight distribution and all that. So it's always fun to get another ride on Tumbili and see how bad it's gonna destroy you, because sometimes it's nothing and sometimes it's a lot. It has really nice theming. I'd rather ride it than any of the Jokers, if just for the theming, even though the layout is technically smaller and worse. Racer is also fun. A good family coaster fit for the park. It's a lot smoother than Kings Island's, and it has just a few pops of floater. I guess you could say it has the most floater in the park, which, yeah, King's Dominion could definitely use a better floater machine than Racer. But this is a good coaster for capacity. You're always going to walk onto this thing. They tend to race it more often than Kings Island does in my experience. And, yeah. Fun little classic out and back. Yeah, your fun classic out and back fix for the day. Then Apple's Apple is the one coaster at this park that I don't really like. You know me, I don't like wild mice. But like, this also really has a extremely long line. Like, I've seen it get up to an hour and a half on days where the rest of the park is a walk-on. And I suspect that this ride might have something to do with the short lines at the rest of the park. I guess this combined with like Tumbili, Reptilian, and Flight of Fear, just eat up all the lines. Everyone's stuck in line for the mid-family coasters or the mid-thrill coasters while you get your laps on the elite coasters in this park. So shout out Apple's Apple for keeping people out of line for Pantherian and Twisted Timbers and Grizzly. This is all the bones for making a really good park. You know, short lines, great rides, good atmosphere, really good operations. But the one ace up this sleeve that this park really has, and it has it over any Six Flags park easily, and honestly I would even put it over Universal and Disney is that this park has Jungle Expedition. And if you don't know, Jungle Expedition is my favorite Six Flags area. It's also my favorite area of any theme park. That's not to say that there aren't areas that are themed better or have a better ride in them. Like you could point to Jurassic World from Islands of Adventure, or Jurassic Park, or Hogwarts, or Burke as being, really great areas with super complete ride lineups and vibes and decoration. But what no other theme park area has, in my opinion, except for maybe some Disneyland areas, but then they don't have high intensity thrill coasters. The one thing that makes Jungle Expedition so great is the combination of quality, quantity, and cohesion. So this area has so much in it. They basically took the entire back corner of the park and rethemed it to Jungle Expedition. So it has Pantherian, A Flight of Fear, Reptilian, Toonbeely, Arachnidia, which is a flat ride, and Pantherian, and Raptera. So just so many rides in this area. Supporting rides, a standout with Pantherian, a kind of second mini standout with Raptera, great kinetic energy from everything aside from Flight of Fear, amazing theming in general, just really nice to look at, great theme music, a really fun area to be in. You could spend an entire day in Jungle Expedition easily, just hopping from the coasters, getting laps on Pantherian, sites, eating food because it has the park's best food. Just an amazing part of the park to be in, and there's a story kind of the Way Foundation, how they found all these like mystical jungle artifacts and creatures and things. There's a bunch of lore that you can look into while you're waiting for the rides. Particularly Toonbeely and Raptera have really cool lore. And yeah, just the way that it all comes together. Yes, it's not Disney Universal level theming. A little bit close. I would say it's up to par with some of the older, like pre-Hogwarts themed lands in terms of quality and scope. But what it has over those areas, the big newer ones, the post-Hogwarts lands, is the amount of attractions. Because most theme parks will open up their big themed land and it'll have like 2 attractions, a gift shop, and a restaurant. And I think that's kind of lame. I definitely prefer having more to do in an area in terms of rides that just keeps me in the area, hopping between rides, as opposed to like, you do your 2 rides and then you shop and then you're out of there. So that's kind of why I enjoy it more than some of these higher budget, crazier themed areas that you see popping up these days. So yeah, Jungle X is awesome and it totally makes the park what it is. Aside from that, you pretty much have some standard Cedar Fair theming throughout the rest of the park. Although there are 2 notable other areas in terms of theming. We have Old Virginia and Candy Apple Grove, and these are your 2 kind of regional themed areas that are, they try to capture that Virginia spirit in the way that like the Yukon and Canada's Wonderland tries to capture Canada's energy. And this area, or these 2 areas, have a really nice vibe to them. I really like the classic music that they're playing, like Beach Boys, Beatles. That just gives them that nice retro. Gets you out of the Six Flagsy pop music that you might find at a lot of these other parks. Yeah, it's pop music, but it's old pop music, so it's themed. It's cohesive. Aside from that, they're not super themed. Candy Apple Grove has some cool stuff going for it. I like that the area around Twisted Timbers has this kind of haunted, abandoned feel to it. It was a really clever small budget retheming for what used to be the Wayne's World area. Um, I would say that this is the biggest lack in the park. Um, Grizzly is really hard to find, it's really tucked away, which is great for the line, but not great for its vibe. Um, and that Old Virginia area in general definitely feels like it's missing a ride. Like, just put another coaster back here, and you got a pretty perfect area that would complement Jungle X really well. But it's clear that the budget has been going to Jungle X for the last 10 years, and like, who am I to complain? Jungle X is awesome. But now that Jungle X is feeling more complete with Pantherian, it would be cool if they directed their attention to this area next and really spruced up, added more theming and cohesion, and kind of buff up this area of the park to bring it closer to Jungle Expeditions level. I don't even think it needs to be at Jungle Expeditions level. Like, that'd be really hard to do given the theme. But just a little bit more here to do so that you can more evenly distribute your time between Jungle X and the rest of the park. Yeah, you do that, you've basically got the perfect park on your hands. But on the topic of things that could be improved about this park, since no park is perfect, there is a few things other than Candy Apple Grove and Old Virginia refurbs that I'd like to see here. In terms of park layout, there's kind of a problem with the connection between Jungle Expedition and Dominator at the front of the park. If you go the other way, Old Virginia is connected to the front of the park pretty easily. You can get to that. But there's kind of a dead end between Dominator and like the kiddie area and Jungle Expedition. So what I would do to bridge the gap is I would add a Camp Snoopy area. King's Dominion has a Planet Snoopy, and of the Planet Snoopies and Camp Snoopies, I vastly prefer Camp Snoopies for having a cohesive theme. Plus, it would complement the Virginia woodsiness really well. And you've already got Woodstock Express between Dominator and Jungle X, so just, yeah, complete that pathway, make it so that you can go in a full loop around the entire park, bring in that Camp Snoopy goodness, give them like a Vekoma family boomerang like Kings Island has, and yeah, you're all set with the park layout. Yeah, the dark rides exist. You got Boo Blasters, and Boo Blasters fulfills its purpose nicely, but after my recent trip to Kings Island, I would say that giving them a ride like Phantom Theater, or even just a clone of Phantom Theater, would definitely do a lot for the park. Something for families to do, and a non-coaster attraction that I would be compelled to re-ride. Whereas Boo Blasters, kind of one and done. And then just like a little thing, I mentioned a bit before that Rapterra doesn't have the best queue shade. I believe they have trees planted in this queue, so this problem is gonna be solved eventually when those trees grow. But the little tents that they put up when it's super hot out are not enough. Like, ideally there would be permanent shade in that queue plot, and then like having those trees grown in is also going to do a lot for the theming and the ride experience on Rapterra, since it wraps around the queue. But yeah, aside from those three things and then like Old Virginia, I think King's Dominion is practically a perfect park. There's very little I would change or add or even remove. Pretty much all I got to say about this park in America.